Okay, so I'm just going to do a brief, hopefully brief introduction, looking at the magnitude and why our small group in Taos started realizing that this was bigger and bigger and bigger than we had ever thought. And there's some, so the big picture, this is last year's, this is the report the Pentagon gives to Congress every year, the base structure. So they have 557,000 buildings that the Pentagon has, over 5,000 sites worldwide. And remember, we saw a map that people are trying to guess, is it actually 900 or 1,000 bases? It's actually sites. Sites include bases, but there are all these other places that the Defense Department operates. Some of them are called camps, some are their off-site locations. We're talking about an incredible number of sites and, almost 28 million acres. This is very, a very big thing. This is just to show sort of the global tentacles, and, you can find that online and read the small print. It's just to show this map would never be published in the US. This is a Canadian map made about the US spaces. Because what a lot of people don't realize is the United States thinks no one else in the world is spending enough on military. And so there's very extreme pressure being put on people all over the world to increase their military spending. Most controversial in Japan. Japan has a pacifist constitution that forbids them from having really anything besides a very small defense budget. And dating back to 2004, the first time I was in Japan, every day in the newspaper was the Americans are pressuring us to amend our constitution and get rid of the pacifist plank and to spend more money on militarism. And so this one shows there's US spending and there's the rest of the big spenders. And what the myth is, it's actually more on the US, because when the US sells F-35s to South Korea, we taxpayers still are paying for most of it. It's a way, this is a budgetary shell game to make it look like other countries are kicking in. But in reality, a lot of the money that's being shown as other countries is still coming out of our pockets. So this is planning out to the future, and the only thing I want to point out is that despite testimony given 2 days ago in Congress about the military is in terrible shape, can barely keep itself operating with all the cuts that it's faced, this is the actual spending. And they go out way far into the distance. They're planning years ahead. I've seen military spending charts that go out to 2070. So, and the one thing I hope doesn't happen, yesterday we started our meeting feeling very good about a victory in North Carolina that we hope holds. It's because they wanted to go into a natural area with incredible migratory bird life, one of the biggest flyways and wintering sites, and so they were able to stop that. But we thought we stopped military activity here in the late 90s, and it turned out the base got a new mission, they had different kinds of aircraft, and they came around again. They're planning out 70 years in advance, all the time, what they're going to be doing. So this picture, some of people have seen. If you Google elephant walk, you will get dozens of these. An elephant walk is when they line up all their planes and they slowly creep down the runway and they start taking off. So this is just one base, and Kathleen, here's the F-16s. We're talking about an enormous amount of equipment, aircraft, ships, that goes on and on and on. So this is the one that makes me very unhappy, and I know it's hard to read, but if you look at that blue line, that's Air Force training funds. Something is coming that is a huge increase. That line goes way up there in the next few years. Where is all that training going to be happening? And how is all that training being funded? You see, the Navy is shown slightly less. It's more level, but there is a planned great increase, and I think it's related to the turkey that can't fly, the F-35. $1.5 trillion program for a new Joint Strike Force fighter bomber that can't fly in the rain. They've never been able to protect it from lightning. They've tried all kinds of lightning rods, and it would go down in a lightning strike. It's just a very bad thing, and the government had sold planes to countries that are now bankrupt, like Spain and Greece, and our government is actually forcing them to keep buying these F-35 fighters, even though their own country really needs the money for more important things, like sustaining itself and its healthcare systems and its education systems. And then this is the real trend. And the only line that's important, what's staying level, is special ops. Where the military is going is all these special operators, as they're called, that really operate very independently. Hollywood couldn't wait to make a movie about the murder of Osama bin Laden and showing how the Navy SEALs and going in there. The money that we're talking about is going into special operations. And these are, current numbers. They go way out into the future. So you find a map, and I don't know why it's so big there, but you go online, you find a map that says there's 87 Air Force bases on the continental US, but in reality there's 274 because they didn't count naval air stations, they didn't count National Guard bases, Marine, Army airfields. Everybody has an Air Force. The Marines have an Air Force, the Army, the Navy, and of course the Air Force. And that is pretty extreme. So here's just some sample costs per flying hour. And this slide is the one where in my day-to-day life, as I run into people and I talk about why I'm opposing all this endless military training, these are the costs per hours. I could have put up every plane, but the B-2A stealth bomber used to only cost $86,000 an hour to fly, but now it's up to $135,000 per hour just to have that plane in the air for training purposes. The F-22 is up to $54,000. The F-22 is very troubling because their stealth coating is sickening. The people that actually have to clean the plane afterwards, the maintenance crews, the coating on the plane is so toxic that it's harming the people that work on that aircraft. And we're assuming that that is going to hold also for the F-35 and for future. I started out as an anti-nuclear, very much focusing on anti-nuclear until I realized how big the Pentagon thing was, and that nuclear is really, in the big scheme of things, as horrible as it is, a micro topic within this gigantic umbrella that's going on. But the Pentagon needs, and there was a hearing on this 2 days ago, they must have 80 to 100 new bombers solely for the purpose of dropping nuclear bombs. That is the only function that our current aircraft can't do. And so that is on the drawing board. But the Air Force, the nuclear Air Force, is a mess. I mean, the public's heard about some of it, and they mistakenly ship nuclear missile fuses. They lose this stuff. It's in transport all the time. A lot of us probably aren't aware, but here in New Mexico, there's an endless stream of nuclear bombs on the roads going from Los Alamos to Kirtland to Pantex in Texas. It's like back and forth, back and forth. They're constantly on the road. If New Mexico was a country, it would be the third biggest nuclear power in the world. There are 1,200 nuclear bombs just sitting in Albuquerque. So, we need to keep that in mind. And so 9 Air Force commanders were just fired. Everybody was cheating on their tests. That was a recent scandal. And then there's the whole issue of, is the country for the people or is it for the Pentagon? Because the Pentagon generates 1 ton of toxic waste per minute, and that's their numbers, okay? And that does not include the nuclear complex, okay? It's endless. 900 of the 1,300 Superfund sites in the United States that are recognized are military Superfund sites, polluted, in need of cleanup. So Camp Lejeune is a good story because when we go to these meetings, the scoping meetings and the public meetings on environmental assessment and the like, we're always hearing that the training has to happen because they're taking our young men and women, which is true, and that they have to get the best training possible. But on the other hand, they would cover up for 30 years that they were giving people toxic water to drink on one of their bases. Camp Lejeune. 1 million people lived and worked there drinking this toxic water. And in 2012, now the survivors of that are eligible for care in the VA, and they can get in line behind Bob and others that are wait for their care. So 500,000 people qualified for VA coverage because the Marine Corps poisoned them while they were living on base. And that's not the only example. Camp Minden, Louisiana, that's tons and tons of explosives. The Army left the base. A private company, Explo, came in, was continuing to produce explosives. They went bankrupt and they walked away. And because it's in Louisiana, the EPA gave them permission to just burn it in the open air until the people learned that they were going to have 80,000 tons of explosives burned every day for over a year. And so they've organized and rallied, and right now it appears the Army is going to spend the extra money to find another way to treat it. They would like to send it to Utah, which is where they deal with a lot of these unused explosives. We bought all that. And they're making more today. And there's tons and tons. Each one of those is a drum full of explosives that is never going to be used. Now, they blew up on their own recently, and that's what brought in the EPA and the Army and the community. And, that's quite tragic. The Center for Public Environmental Oversight, after the last BRAC, the base realignment process that the military goes through and they close bases, this organization formed because it wanted to make sure that the bases were going to be safe for civilian use. And, most munitions are never used in war, as the slide says. They just sit around. And then they become outdated. Now, I could see a loaf of bread or something, or we hear all the time the nuclear bombs are outdated and we need new ones or new parts. But so here's what they have on hand right now, over 1 billion pounds of munitions that they don't even know what to do with. I mean, there is no safe way to deal with this. And I like to quote, one of the best talks I ever heard was Winona LaDuke, a Native American activist, said she thought the U.S. should run on mom's rules, which you can't make a new mess till you clean up your old mess. And, I like to cite that. And that's actually something that a lot of people, as you talk to regular people and you say, well, what about mom's rules? What's mom's rules? Almost every mom, dad, sibling, it's like, you can't make a new mess till you clean up your old mess. So, I'm always looking for language that isn't alienating as we talk to people, that they really get, what it is we're talking about. So corruption in the military, I felt I wanted to share a little about that. The Pentagon has never passed an audit. People know that there are several pallets of US $100 bills that disappeared in Afghanistan that people saw being offloaded, and no one knows where that money went. We actually shipped pallet loads of cash to Afghanistan and Iraq, and there was no accounting of that. And funny thing, no one knows where it went. So, but the sexual assault, thank goodness, has started to become recognized. And Lackland Air Force Base, so far as we know, was the worst, where the training staff had basically a policy of raping the young recruits, the new enlisted people. That's the first place you go at 17, 18, maybe 20 years old. And the charges are coming. There's some people have gotten very heavy sentences, life in prison. Some of the people that were involved in the cover-up. It turns out everyone knew that this was happening on that base, and they would report it. And so there are a number of 20-year prison terms, and 2 people, I believe, have gotten life in prison. But these young people that we're sending to the military, their lives are ruined. I mean, if anyone saw any of the testimony of the young men and women that had the courage to come forward in Congress, they're not getting over it. They had given all their trust to the exact person that turned around and committed a criminal act against them. So the economic benefit of militarism, we hear that a lot here. Here's the real economic benefit. The top 5 CEO pay was $21.5 million in 1 year, and they weren't even the top. It was Honeywell. These companies, they're all in Arizona, they're all in New Mexico, they're all everywhere. They're all in Colorado. That's who's making money from war. And who's paying the price are poor and working families whose children are going to war. So the Peaceful Skies Coalition, our position, and I think we'll get into this a little bit, that no NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, no procedure that is underway now is valid because the Pentagon has failed to provide a baseline. The first thing that's supposed to happen with any NEPA activity is they say, here's the baseline, and then and then you build up from there what the cumulative impacts are. And I know a lot of people here have responded to numerous of these various NEPA things. So we say over and over, every time we submit a comment to either the Army, the Navy, or the Air Force, we tell them this whole process is invalid and you have to stop until we have an actual baseline. They draw these circles of airspace like there are walls in the sky, So here's Cannon's airspace and here's Holloman's airspace. Well, it's air. And they're saying, well, we only have to talk about what's happening here. And that's not really the case. There is, and we get caught up, we're volunteers trying to respond to a very highly paid military and defense contractors that they hire to do these. And we're going to hear about how tired some of our communities are that have had, I think they've had 6 in the Puget Sound, Olympic Peninsula area this year. Fort Carson has had 4. They're right over the line from us in Colorado. They just break into these little pieces and say, well, we're already flying, I'll just say 100 planes a day, and we're only adding 25 more, so there's no impact. And, it just doesn't work that way. So here's what we think must be in a baseline, and we also think to talk about wildlife, and birds and sea life without using a bioregional approach is just, it makes a mockery of the whole regulatory process. To say, well, the Gunnison sage grouse hatches its young in, May. So we won't do things in May, we'll do it in January. That isn't how nature works at all. And then,
I'm taking off the microphone.
so here's what we always say. Right now, there's a big assault on the national forest and other public lands, national parks, the BLM. There's a proposal called the Hammett out of Fort Carson to do 52 new helicopter landing zones in Royal Gorge on public land. And we're going to hear a little more about what's going on in the Cibola National Forest, the Olympic National Forest, and others. Our position is no military use on public lands. That we're pretty firm on that. Our region was just now is the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument. We submitted comments that said no military use in this area. We haven't heard back from the BLM. So I just want to show, because I'm a masochist, so every day I get an email from the Pentagon called the Defense Digest, and it lists every contract that they've given. It's billions every day. But this is one small contract, but it's a good example of how they spread the money on. This is how they get the congressional buy-in. Okay, this is one contract. Utah, Georgia, California, New Hampshire, Arizona, California, Idaho, Kansas, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Illinois, New Hampshire, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Texas, and Toronto, Canada even got 1%. So they take the funds and they scatter it, and they immediately have, how many members of Congress is that? They have all those members of Congress now scrambling to keep that program funded. And I see this every day on the list of contracts. It's a very brilliant strategy. It really is. And, so this is what I hope we talk about. And I know it's hard to read, but
Zoom it out a little bit.
This is a Gallup poll where they read a list of institutions in American society and say, which do you trust? What do you have confidence in the most? And it's the military. And the military went up and is consistently going up. Despite all what we know now about the sexual assaults, despite what we know about the pallets of money that just disappeared, despite what we know about the pollution, this is our challenge. It goes military, small business, the police, church or organized religion, the presidency, the medical system, the Supreme Court, public schools, criminal justice system, banks. How'd they even get on there? And banks are going up in trust. TV news, newspapers, Congress is at the bottom, and their confidence has gone down. But this is a real dilemma for me, because in my daily life, I work for real people. I've worked in public health for more than 40 years. I'm helping run a community center. We do programs with children all the time. How have we failed to get the message to the American people? But here's good news. We're here. Our friends that are joining us online and by e-meeting are here. This is a first. And this is the way that I can end on an upbeat note, because there's something growing here where people are coming together. And I just have one. This is front page news in Japan, Tokyo. We've got the former mayor of Taos down at the bottom there, and the former governor of Piqueres Pueblo, a picture of Taos Pueblo. We get more media coverage in Japan than we get anywhere in the US. because they feel anything we do is going to benefit them. And it's just amazing. I mean, we had probably 15 different TV crews and reporters from Japan come through Taos, New Mexico over the last couple of years. And people wanted me to show this. I don't know if we can get it where we can see it. This was by popular request. Well, we had enough aircraft noise, but what this is showing is one osprey landing, breaking all the branches off a tree and injuring all the people who had come to this air show on Staten Island to watch it. And you see all the EMTs and everybody rushing over to aid the people. And the osprey lands and all the military guys are running the other way from where the people are injured, and then they all get down with their guns. They were trained to, demonstrate how they come in and land. I just wanted that big picture. We're dealing with an institution that is very much trusted by the American people. And they're not getting the message that, everything they're sacrificing, education, healthcare, infrastructure, all of those things. So that's just a background of why we realized here in Taos that we needed to reach out to the others organizing. So thank you.